There are doubts over the future of the HS2 high-speed rail link after the government announced a review into how and whether the project should go forward. Well, let's get more on that story now. Lord ONeill is the Vice Chair of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, which gives him a close interest in the fate of HS2. I spoke to him a little earlier this evening and began by asking what he thought of today's announcement.
My initial, and actually I think the same a couple of hours later, is that it's a good idea. I think there's been so much growing talk about it and, strong noises from many, particularly my northern colleagues, in favour, and many doubts asked by others, including other colleagues of mine in the House of Lords. I think it's a good idea to do, and it allows those that are so in favour to try and strengthen the case or restate the case. But I think it will allow for some, hopefully, more truly analytical look at the costs versus the benefits, perhaps including some of the potential productivity benefits before the final decision's made. I think the scale of the cost and the scale of it, I think it justifies it despite the obvious downsides.
Do you fear that it could be scrapped altogether? And if so, what impact would that have on the North?
I strongly believe that Northern Powerhouse Rail is much more important for Northern productivity and therefore national productivity. And so long as the bits of HS2 that are so vital for connecting northern cities with each other, I personally don't think it would be as devastating as I know many of my good friends from the north believe, and will be mad hearing me again saying that. What is crucial for the Northern Powerhouse project is to have Northern Powerhouse Rail, and allowing the agglomeration between closely geographically located cities connect both efficiently and cheaply. And that's much more important than HS2 for the north of England, in my view.
Isn't it also, though, important to close that north-south divide? And without HS2, you can't do that.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. I'm somebody that's spent the best part of 40 years whittling between London and Manchester, and the past 5 years a lot between London and Leeds and London and Liverpool, and already the improvement in both the frequency and the comfort of those journeys is dramatically different than 20-30 years ago, and that's not boosted the north of England. It's just made it easier for people to get into London. I think it is an issue for Birmingham. I think because HS2 is would so strongly connect London to Birmingham, almost
and the
making
investment that's
Birmingham
already taken place in Birmingham on the basis of HS2.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. If you were to decide that to boost the national airport capacity, you'd boost Birmingham instead of Heathrow, that in itself would completely justify the whole thing. And so to justify the kind of cost, and of course in the background there's all the idea that the cost might be a lot higher, the productivity case has to be restated more strongly, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the vital parts of HS2 for the Northern Powerhouse Rail, also known sometimes as HS3. As part of this review, one element looking at the potential cost-cutting and efficiencies that could be made could be just giving phase one the go-ahead, London to Birmingham, and therefore you wouldn't have the vital links you need for Northern Powerhouse Rail, would you?
Well, that would be ridiculous. I'm almost taking it for granted that even though, because more work has started on London to Birmingham, maybe I'm going to be badly disappointed, but I think it would be for a Prime Minister that his first speech anywhere in the country was to talk so enthusiastically about Northern Powerhouse Rail. I think it would be a very strange thing for them to make that decision, unless on the absolute same day they said they were going to spend all the resulting savings on everything to do with Northern Powerhouse Rail. Otherwise, it'd look a bit silly.
And in terms of the reason this is happening now, the timing, is this really about money, or is there a political element here, looking to a potential autumn election, perhaps?
You know, I mean, of course, that's possible. I encourage you to ask potentially wiser political antennae than me about that. But, you know, as I said at the start, even though I, amongst those that have some doubts, and I think I'm pretty objective about the whole thing, and I've thought about it a lot in the context of the Northern Powerhouse, something that obviously I've been right at the heart of. I think for those that passionately argue how difficult it would be and how damaging it would be to not go ahead, here is a chance for them to restate it in a more powerful way, and that would negate the doubts that so many people have. And I think separately of the obvious politics behind it, there is a genuine, objective, rational case for this to be looked at before the final go-ahead is made.
This is designed, though, is it not, to transform the transport network for the next century after decades and decades of underinvestment. £7 billion has already been spent. We talked about the costs potentially spiralling to 70, 80 billion, north of 100 billion, the Prime Minister says. But if you scrap this, what does it say about our infrastructure plans?
I mean, I think that amongst all the things I've thought about it, I think almost definitely the biggest dilemma of scrapping it would indeed be not just the 7 billion, if that's the right number, but the amount of time and effort and new entities and supply businesses that are being created. And it would send another bad message about aspects of how we deal with big infrastructure in the same way you see about Hinkley Point and the whole energy complex, as well as these kind of transport projects. However, I think in this particular instance, to have the review is justified, partly for the other reason you raised in your question. If this thing were to end up costing more than £100 billion, that is a significant part of Britain's GDP. And to go ahead with that kind of expenditure, you've got to be really, really confident of powerful productivity benefits. And I don't really see them.